Okay, we're in Psalms 101, and looking at this Psalms and just talking about the overall picture that's given here. And we're on page 28 of the notes. We're on the second half, talking about his principles. The word wicked means worthless, wicked, destruction, and talking about that in verse number 3. And on verse number 4, I will not know a wicked person. We talked about that last week, and we talked about I will set no wicked thing before mine eyes, that I will make that commitment in the Lord to keep what I look at. And it's really important. We're looking at Colossians chapter 3 on Sunday morning, and we talked about things that we need to mortify the deeds of the flesh, and we need to put off other things in our lives. And we talked about this last Sunday, that it's not having all the do's and don'ts does not make you right with God. You can have all kinds of standards. You can have a whole list of things you're going to do and a whole list of things you're not going to do. And you can do all the right things and not be the right person. But you cannot be the right person and not do the right things. And so we need to put the emphasis on being that right person and being right with the Lord. But at the same time, the psalmist here understood that there are certain things I just don't want to put in my life. I don't want to put before me. And he said, I'm going to control what I look at. I'm going to control where I go. I'm going to control all of these areas of my life. And I would challenge you as we look at this psalm to set standards for yourself. Realizing, again, they're not going to keep you right with the Lord. They're not going to make you right with the Lord. But they do help us to keep doing the right thing. And so you ought to have standards about where you go, what you look at, what you'll do, and to have that set in your life. And so, and then we talked about turning aside. He talks in verse number 6. Mine eyes shall be upon the faithful. Let me get my place here. Let's start with verse 3. I will set no wicked thing before mine eyes. I hate the work of them that turn aside. It shall not cleave to me. And we talked about that phrase, turn aside, just at the end of last week. And there's two aspects to it. One is to turn from the right path. Go over to Proverbs chapter 4. Real quickly, look at Psalms 40 before we go to Proverbs chapter 4. Psalms chapter 40. And look at verse number 4. Psalms chapter 40 and verse number 4. Blessed is the man that maketh the Lord his trust, and respecteth not the proud, nor such as turn aside to lies. And so this idea of turn aside, there's a couple of possibilities here. And one is just the plain being distracted easily. A lot of us are like the dog with the bone, and then we see something else, we drop the bone, now we're going over here, and then we go over there, and we're distracted easily. And we've got to be careful. We get distracted from doing the right things. I find that true in my life. I go on the internet to do something, like I'll go to Facebook to make a post or take care of something or whatever, and then all of a sudden I'm going to look at this, and I look at that, and I look at the other thing, and you get distracted. And you can do the same thing when trying to have devotions. You can do the same thing in many areas of your life where we get distracted and we easily turn aside, not necessarily to bad things, not necessarily to wrong things, but we get distracted from the right thing. And I find that's one of my major challenges in my Christian walk, is I get distracted from what I'm doing and get off trail and get lost in just the busyness and the busy things and the things that are interesting, but they're not beneficial. Then go to Proverbs chapter 4 and look at verses 25 through 27. Proverbs chapter 4, verses 25 through 27. Let thine eyes look right on, and let thine eyelids look straight before thee. Ponder the path of thy feet, and let all thy ways be established. Turn not to the right hand nor to the left. Remove thy foot from evil. And so this kind of goes along with what he was talking about. Set no wicked thing before mine eyes. And he says, I'm not going to be turned aside. And he says there, he says, I hate the work of them to turn aside, because we get distracted, we get off the right path, we get in the wrong direction. And again, this can happen so easily. You have a remote control and you just flipping through the channels and you get distracted. You're on the computer, you get distracted. It's just something that can happen so quickly and so easily in our lives that the psalmist said, I want to avoid this. I want to be careful of this. I don't want to be one of those people that's turning aside. And also he says, I hate the work of them that turn aside. And that's those that pull me away too, that kind of head off in the wrong direction, end up following. We talked about, well, I think one of you mentioned last week, week in my series on the wise, the simple, the scorner, and the fool. And we talked about the simple, and the simple is open to whatever influences in their life. And so if there's a person that's going the wrong direction, they're influenced by that easily. And he says, I don't want to be around people that are going to pull me away from the Lord. And all of us know when that's happened. It's happened to every one of our lives. You get around somebody and they distract you from doing right. They pull you away from the Lord. They get you off in the wrong direction. He says, I don't want to be around people like that. And then secondly, turn back, the people that turn back to the world. Go over to 2 Timothy chapter 4 and verse number 10. 2 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 10. It says, for Demas hath forsaken me, having loved this present world, and is departed unto Thessalonica, Crescens to Galatia, Titus unto Dalmatia. And so Demas was somebody that was serving the Lord. He was involved in the ministry. He was helping out Paul. And then he got distracted by the world. He turned aside to the world. And he loved the present world. And he said, that's not where I want to go. That's not what I want my life to be. And I know if I'm going to stay faithful to the Lord, I've got to be careful not to get distracted by the things of the world. And I've got to be careful about what kind of people I allow in my life that pull me off in that direction as well. And so he said, I don't want to turn aside. Then we look at, going back to Psalms 101, it says in verse 3, I will set no wicked thing before mine eyes. I hate the work of them that turn aside. It shall not cleave to me. Now, what does the word cleave mean? What does the word cleave mean? Somebody can answer that. Raise your hand or just speak it out real loud. Pull your mask out and speak it out loud. All right, Garrett? What's that? Okay, clinging to something. What else? The word.
It makes me think of a dog with peanut butter.
What?
The dog with peanut butter.
Dog with peanut butter and trying to get its cleave into his mouth. All right. All right. What else?
I think of cleave, like when you glue two pieces of wood together, when you try to pull them apart, it's not going to come apart like it was before. It's going to rip from the other.
Right. The word cleave means to glue together something. You leave your mother and father and you cleave to your wife or your husband, and it's being glued together. And whenever you glue two things together, like two pieces of wood, if you try to pull them apart, what happens often is they don't break where they were glued together. The glue pulls off one side or the other. And there's a lot of illustrations in there that we can take. I talk to young people about their dating relationships, and when you get physically and emotionally attached in your relationship, when it breaks up, you pull apart, and if you've cleaved together emotionally or physically, it's going to rip part of you out when you pull apart. And what's happened in a lot of relationships is we finally get married, but we've left pieces ourselves in all of those relationships before that point. And we've got to realize that when you cleave in a relationship, there's always a little bit that's going to be left behind you when you break that relationship. And also talk about in the marriage series how that if you glue two pieces of wood together, there's some strength in that, but they can break easily. But if you do what's called dovetailing, where you cut grooves into them and then put them together and glue them, there's more strength. And when we bring our lives together, we have strength in cleaving one to another in our marriage. And so there's a lot of the words used quite often in the Bible. If you look at Romans chapter 12 and verse number 9, Romans chapter 12 and verse number 9. It says, let love be without dissimulation, abhor that which is evil, cleave to that which is good. Now, the psalmist says, I will not let wicked cleave to me. I'm not going to let it get stuck on me. Whereas here it says that cleave to that which is good. So we want to grab hold of that which is good, but not let it grab hold of us. I think of the psalmist, what he's talking about. It's like when you walk through a field of weeds, and when you get out of there, you get all those stickers all over you, the ones that are almost like Velcro, and they stick to you. And that's what happens when we walk in this world, when we get in these places, we end up with all these things cleaving to us and grabbing hold of us. And that's one of the challenges that we have. We want to be careful where we go so we don't have that happen, because they're hard to get off of there, and you go and picking them all off. And we want to cleave to that which is good. We want to be attached and grab hold of that. Go over to Joshua chapter 22. Joshua chapter 22 and verse number 5. Joshua chapter 22 and verse number 5. But take diligent heed to do the commandment and the law which Moses, the servant of the Lord, charged you, to love the Lord your God, and to walk in all his ways, and to keep his commandments, and to cleave unto him, and to serve him with all your heart, with all your soul. And then look over at Joshua chapter 23 and verse number 8. It says, but cleave unto the Lord your God as you have done unto this day. And then go over to Acts chapter 11 and verse number 23. Acts chapter 11 and verse number 23. It says, who when he came and had seen the grace of God was glad, and exhorted them all that with purpose of heart they would cleave unto the Lord. So when the Bible gives us a physical illustration of a spiritual truth, we want to think about the physical illustration and kind of relate it to the two. Now, we are in a different world today. I don't think they had super glue or Gorilla Glue back then, but they did have certain kinds of glue that they would use and things that they would use to glue things together. And so I believe they understood that illustration of gluing. They didn't have Velcro back then, but they did have things that would connect to one another. And so when we think about cleaving to the Lord, these three verses says we need to cleave to the Lord. What is the picture that comes to your mind when you think about gluing things together and using that? Give me some object lesson pictures, some illustrations from this word that would come to your mind. When you say it, pull your mask down, speak real loud and clear. All right, Caleb?
Evidence of where someone's been, right? So Joshua, if he's been outside in the yard, comes back in, I can oftentimes see different plants that are stuck to his skin or his clothes or his hair. So it shows me where he's been, what he's been around.
Right. Diane could say, you've been out in the yard, haven't you? You've been out doing dirty things, haven't you? You've been working in the car because it cleaves to you. And I'm the kind of person, I cannot wear white because dirt always cleaves to me. It comes looking for me. I get around it, it jumps out at me. And so it's evidence you've been with the Lord. If you're cleaving to the Lord, the evidence is going to be there with that. What are some other illustrations you get in your mind? Not just with gluing, but this word cleave in your mind. Noel?
What you just said reminds me of when Moses spent time with God, right? He would come out and it would be...
His face just shown.
He had to cover it.
Right. Okay. All right, good. All right, Ansner?
I think it relates back to the word perfect here, where it says blameless. And when I think of blameless and cleaving, not having any like handles where anybody could pull you down with. And so that idea of not being accused of anything.
Okay, so not having handles or things that they can pull you down with. All right. Anybody else with a thought on this? Any other thoughts on it? I think of just in my mind, I kind of think of different things. I think of a, young couple, they're cleaving each other, they're holding on real tight to each other when they're newly engaged or newly married, and thinking of that. How much do we love the Lord? In all these verses it talked about loving God. And when you love somebody, you want to hold hands, you want to be close, you want to have that relationship there. And I think also when you glue something together, there's a commitment to it. And once you put that glue on there, you're now committed to it. And there's all kinds of illustrations that we can pull out of there. And that's one of the good things to do when the Bible gives you a physical illustration, just to stop and think about it. And think about when you glue things. When I glue things, first of all, I failed gluing in kindergarten. That was one of the things. I have a report card that says failed gluing. And I still fail in gluing. I cannot glue anything without leaving a mess everywhere. I have a tough time with that. And so I think of that. Tupu?
I think of the Ruth leaving to Naomi. Instead of her going back to where she came from, she told Naomi, wherever you go, I'll be with you.
I'm stuck to you now. You're stuck with me, and that's good. All right. Any other thoughts?
Illustrations of people, Daniel, how he cleaved to the Lord, he didn't, no matter what they said.
He held on to the Lord, right? And I think when you think of today too, there's all kinds of different kinds of glue. There's some glue like rubber cement that you glue because you're going to want to pull it apart again. It's not a permanent glue. And then you've got other kinds of glue that are just really permanent. They're not coming apart no matter what. And here's another thing I think with glue. When you're gluing two things together, what makes them even stronger in their gluing? What can you do to make them even stronger in their gluing when you glue two things together? Anybody know? All right, heat sometimes can do that. A glue gun will help with that. roughing it up before you glue it so that each the surfaces, pardon the pun, has got a place for that glue to kind of connect in there. Ricky, you ought to know another one. When you put two pieces of wood together, what do we usually do with that when we glue them together to make them stronger? Clamp them together, the pressure. If you put pressure on the glued items, there's a better seal that's made. And so that pressure, and so sometimes it takes pressure to cause us to cleave to the Lord in doing that. Jensen?
I don't have an illustration, but just from this verse, brings my mind to Psalm 37, where it says, "Fret not thyself because of evildoers, neither be thou envious against the workers of iniquity."
Okay, fret not thyself because of evildoers, neither be thou envious of the workers of iniquity. I'm just saying that for everybody else.
So when I see the word "it shall not cleave to me," what I believe he's saying is what those who turn aside what they do, I am not going to fret after what they're doing.
Right.
I'm going to be upset. I'm not going to be envious of what they're doing, because what they're doing, according to Scripture, is worthless. And so I will not be turned aside.
Right. We often hold on to bitterness or anger or something, some hurt somebody gave us, and we.
But in the sense of just seeking after just like the lust of the flesh, the lust of
Right,
the eye, the pride
right.
of life.
Yeah, we're not going to hold on to that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Just thinking
good.
of the Lord rather than-
All right. So a lot of good illustrations out of that. And I just want to encourage you again, when the Bible gives us a physical object or a physical picture to illustrate a spiritual truth, take time to kind of meditate on it and really kind of think about it. And you can even say, well, I'm going to go glue something together to see what I can come up with here, and doing that. And that's a fun way to teach your kids as well. They said, let's glue something and talk about that, cleaving and the idea of it. Okay, go to Colossians chapter 3 and verse number 14. Colossians chapter 3. It's part of our series on Sunday morning, Colossians chapter 3, verse 14. And above all these things, put on the charity, which is the bond or the glue of perfectness. And so love is that glue that glues us together. And so what are some ways that we can bond with other Christians? And we can, through love, we can have that cleaving to one another. What are some things and ways that we can do that? Anybody have any thoughts there? Garrett?
I know these Bible studies we've been doing, it's brought a huge camaraderie.
Yeah, just Bible studies together. Boy, that really bonds you when you study the Word of God together. And I think everybody in the home Bible studies will attest to that they really feel connected to the people that they're studying together with. And so home Bible studies, what are some other ways?
I think just taking some time to get to know another Christian and their family can really draw you and just create that real bond between you and that family.
Okay, taking the time to get to know them and get to know one another, that's something we fail to do. We're so in our talking in church, we don't really go beyond just this much in depth. And so there's, building a greater depth in our relationship and building a greater connection. I think going out to eat together or food fellowship is a way to do that. Tupu says amen there. It is a place to bond. You bond over food, and there's a certain extent of that in doing that. Any other ways you can think of where you can bond in love with another? What's that? In worship. Yeah, worshiping together is a way to bond in love. All right, JJ? Praising together? Oh, praying together. Oh, yeah. Praying together is a great way to bond with people. People I prayed with, you really connect with them in a different way. And praying for them. I was working on my prayer list today, updating it, and just realizing how much praying for people has connected me with them so much more in so many ways. And so praying for them. Ansner?
Through your struggles.
Through struggles as a way to bond with people, especially when they come alongside of you to help you through that situation. Okay? Anybody else? And going alongside of them. Okay, we've had some people here recently gone through some tough times, and when we come walk beside them and pray for them, that does it.
Yeah, this verse says, above all those things, put on charity, which is the bond of perfectness. And my footnote says, usually when we think of perfectness, we think of maturity, but mine says unity. And we bond together when we're unified.
There's a unity there. Okay, good. Some good thoughts there. Let's go back to Psalms 101 And let's go to the next section there. It says, a forward heart shall depart from me. I will not know a wicked person. Now, does that mean, how many of you know wicked people? Raise your hand. Everybody does. If you live in the world, if you work in the world, you know wicked people. So he's not saying I'm not going to know a wicked person. So what does he mean by, I will not know a wicked person? What does he mean by that phrase?
I think it's not necessarily to, deny them, but definitely, you have that space between you and that non-Christian that you want to bring that Christian example, but you also don't want to go do the non-Christian things that they're doing.
Right. Okay. And we'll look at that in a minute. I think you're right there that there's a difference there in that way.
To not know them like close enough or spend enough time with them that they influence you or
Right.
impact.
It's building an intimate relationship with him. The Bible uses the word he knew his wife, and that's not what he's saying here directly, but the word know and knew in the Bible indicates a close, intimate relationship. He says, I'm not going to build that close, intimate relationship with someone who's wicked because they can influence me, and I don't want to have that influence in my life. But at the same time, we live in a world of wicked people. We've got to be able to reach out to them. We've got to be able to minister to them. We want to build relationships with them so we can talk about the gospel. So where does that line get drawn, and how do we draw that line? Caleb?
The word know has an idea of experiential knowledge, something that I've experienced. So when he says, I won't know a wicked person, he's relating that to not knowing or experiencing their wickedness.
Right. So standing around, listening to their dirty story, letting them show you things that are wrong, going with them to the bar, things like that, I think is very much so here.
I think it's important to combine verses 3 and 4 because they're talking about the same thing, the same thought of he's not going to allow anything that is wicked before his eyes or worldly desires or to cling to what other people are doing and not to fret about it, not to be envious of what they're doing. But then his heart, what he's saying is a forward heart or wrong heart is going to depart from you. And so he's taking away the externals. He's also making sure that his internals are right. And then I will not know a wicked person. I'm not going to be involved, and I'm not even going to worry about it.
Right.
My focus is on the Lord,
Right.
not what every.
Sometimes we get so focused on the world and what they're doing wrong that we obsess about it to the point that we're not looking at ourselves.
But not necessarily what they're doing wrong, but even desire their wrong things or desire the
Right.
path that they're wanting.
Okay.
That they're
All right, Diane?
Continuing that, I have another footnote in my Bible. To know means to esteem. So I would not esteem the wicked.
Okay.
How many times does the wicked get glorified?
Right. Okay, and I think that's good. And by the way, that's a good reason to have a good note Bible, study Bible that's got notes in there and stuff like that because that helps you out. Ensner?
I have a cross-reference to Psalm 119, 115.
Real loud. Read it real loud.
It says, depart from me, ye evildoers, for I will keep the commandments of my God. And I think the know here is to be able to filter whoever these wicked people are through the Word of God. And so if you know God's commandments, then you'll be able to do these things.
Okay. All right, good. And doing that. Tupu?
The first sentence of verse 4 tells it says, the forward heart shall depart from me. I will not know a wicked person.
Okay.
Having that heart, a bad heart, separate you from being with the wrong people.
Okay. So he says, a forward heart that shall depart from me. So what does the word forward mean? Not forward, but forward. And what does that word mean then? Does anybody know? Wicked, perverse is the word I have down, false. Anybody else? Let's take a look at Proverbs chapter 11 and verse number 20. When you're trying to understand a word in the Bible, one of the first places to go look is in the Bible. So look at the verses where the same word is used, and that's one way to discover it. They that are of a forward heart are abomination to the Lord, but such as are upright in their way are his delight. And so it's a forward heart is one that's perverse or wicked. Now, when you think of the word forward, it's it's hard to say because we want to say forward, but I think they both kind of tie together. It's a heart that is heading in that direction, a heart that is leaning in that direction. And he says, I don't want to, that's not the direction I want my life to go. And I don't want to go in the way of the wicked. I don't want to go in the way of perverseness. I don't want to follow that path in my life. I don't want my heart to lead me in that way. Keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. And so I need to have a heart that's not leaning towards those things and not desiring those things in that way as well. And then the word know, I think, indicates a close relationship. Let's go over to 1 Corinthians or 2 Corinthians, or I think it's supposed to be 2 Corinthians chapter 5. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, and let me take a look here. What's that? Oh, we should separate ourselves from sin and sinners. All right, let's go to 2 Corinthians chapter 6 first of all there then. 2 Corinthians chapter 6 and verses 14 through 17. He says, be ye not unequally yoked together with unbelievers, for what fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness, and what communion hath light with darkness, and what concord hath Christ with Belial, or what part hath he that believeth with infidel, and what agreement hath the temple of God with idols? For ye are the temple of the living God. As God has said, I will dwell in them and walk in them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Wherefore come out from among them, be ye separate, saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing. And so we need to realize that evil companions corrupt good manners, and the Bible talks about that. And when we have the wrong kind of people in our lives, they're going to influence us. And we need to make sure that the influencers in our life, today we talk about influencers on social media, but the influencers in our life, the people that make difference in our lives, need to be godly people, love the Lord. It doesn't mean we're not around people that are wicked and we ignore them totally. We separate ourselves totally from where we just don't have anything to do with them. And we see that in the scriptures. Let's look, first of all, 1 Corinthians 5, 9 through 11. Paul is dealing here with a man in the church who was living in adultery with his stepmother. And he said, even the unsaved people know this is wrong. And they said, you guys got to deal with this. And he says, you need to separate. Basically, he said, you've got to discipline them. And it's not that you don't have anything to do with them, but you make sure it's clear to them, we're not in fellowship together. It's not okay what you're doing. And then he gets down to verse 9. He says, I wrote unto you an epistle not to company with fornicators, yet not altogether with the fornicators of this world, or with the covetous, or extortioners, or with idolaters, for then must ye go out of the world. But now I have written unto you not to keep company if any man that is called a brother be a fornicator, or covetous, or idolater, or a railer, or drunkard, or extortioner, with such a one know not to eat. We can't treat Christians that are living a non-godly life like everything's okay. And even to a certain extent with the world, that can't be our influences in our life. But that doesn't mean I don't take them to lunch and try to build a relationship with them so I can witness to them and bring them to the Lord. Jesus was around sinners and publicans and people that were wicked people. And he didn't just say, I don't want anything to do with you, but he was very clear, go and sin no more. He was very clear what you're doing is wrong. And we need to be in the same way in that way as well in doing that. Okay, going back to Psalms 101, he goes on to say in verse number 5, whoso privily slanders neighbor, him will I cut off. Him that hath a high look and a proud heart will not I suffer. So why should we not suffer the things that are listed in verse number 5? And
But you need to realize suffer means to allow.
right, I'm not going to tolerate this. I'm not going to allow this, is what he's saying there. So why should we not allow these things? And I think one of the reasons why is because God hates them. Go over to Proverbs chapter 6. Proverbs chapter 6 and verses 16 through 19. These 6 things does the Lord hate, yea, 7 are an abomination unto him. A proud look, a lying tongue, a hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked imaginations, feet that be swift in running to mischief, a false witness speaketh lies, and he that soweth discord among the brethren. This list is very parallel to the list that the psalmist is saying, listen, this is not where the things that I'm going to tolerate. I'm not going to put up with them. We can't put up with gossip. When somebody starts gossiping, you need to put the fire out. Gossip is kindling that starts the fire, and the only way to put a fire out is take away the fuel. And we can't put up with that. You can't put up with people that are complainers and people that are doing these kind of things. He said, I'm not going to tolerate that. Somebody who slanders his neighbor, or somebody that has a high look and a proud heart and thinks that he knows better than everybody else. It's not something I'm going to tolerate. And I think as Christians, we tolerate that too often. So what is the best way to cut off gossip? Go to Proverbs chapter 26. And verses number 20 and 21. Where no wood is, there the fire goeth out. So where there's no talebearer, the strife ceases. As coals are to burning coals and wood to fire, so is a contentious man to kindle strife. So we take the fuel away, the fire goes out. And the problem is with gossip is it's all the kindling. If you ever were a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout and you learned how to start a fire when you're out in the woods there, you don't grab a big old log and try to light a match to it or try to put sparks onto it. You go find little things, little kindling, straw and little branches, and you put them together, and then you start the fire with that, and then you add bigger and bigger things. And really, that's what happens in a lot of cases. It starts out with little digs and little things. And then after we've heard enough little things, we start to believe the big things. If somebody were to come to you and say, well, pastor's a drunkard, I think hopefully all of you would say, I don't believe that. That's not even close to being true. That's not my reputation. But if they came to you and said, well, pastor, he did this, and pastor, he did that, you might listen to those things. And then as you listen to enough of those things, then you're going to believe that I'm a drunkard too. Because the little kindling adds up and starts the fire going, then you believe the bigger and bigger things. So we need to be careful not just of the big gossip and the big things, but we need to be careful of the little things, the little digs and the little hurts that people share, and not do it ourselves and not listen to it as well.
You have to be careful on what you share as a prayer request, because
Right.
sometimes it's not.
We have nice ways of sharing gossip as Christians, and that's something we have to be careful of. Go over to James chapter 3 and verses 5 and 6. James chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. Even so, the tongue is a little member and boasts great things. Behold, how great a matter a little fire kindleth. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members, that it defileth the whole body and setteth on fire the course of nations, is set on fire of the hell. So again, he's just saying here, listen, your tongue can cause great damage. So don't provide fuel to the fire. Don't be a gossip, and don't listen to gossip. Don't have that proud look. And so what is a high look? He says, mine eyes shall, he says, whoso private slanders neighbor, him will I cut off, him that hath a high look and a proud heart. Go to Proverbs 18:27. Proverbs 18:27. Whoops. Psalms 18:27. I'm sorry. I misread my own thing there. Psalms 18:27. For thou wilt save the afflicted people, but will bring down high looks. And then Proverbs chapter 6, verses 16 through 19. These 6 things that the Lord hate, ye 7 are abomination, and you get down there, and he talks about verse 17, a proud look. So what is a high look or a proud look when we talk about that? It's different than a proud heart. So what is a high look? What do you think? Jensen?
A high look is a person who is with this expectation because they are in this special position, or they have special abilities, or celebrated person, that they expect specific treatment, how people are to talk to them, how people are to treat them, that they don't need to serve anybody, that people need to serve them, that people need to say things that make them exalted and loftier, because the expectation of I'm up here and everybody's down.
Yeah, so a high look is somebody, and usually a lot of times they are talented, they have ability, they're in a position of authority, and they kind of expect everybody to treat them differently. And so it's an outward action. Many times they're not in that position, but they think they are. They think they know better than everybody else. And so, and it's different than a proud heart. Now I want to ask you why the difference in just a minute too, but let's get some more comments on a proud look or high look.
I think the context of this verse is saying people people who put others down to make themselves look good, that's the one that they resemble.
Yeah. We would say today they look down their nose at them. They think they're better because of their position, because of their money, because of their talent or whatever else it is, and they think they're better. And it's not always, when you're in that position, but they think they're in that position.
I think just to clarify that, it's not always apparent. Sometimes it's subtle. Racism,
Right.
exactly this. Anything that has to do with position, race, gender,
Right.
cultural background, all of those are part of age.
Yeah.
All those are part of a high look. But it's not always something that's super external or something we see right away. Sometimes it's very subtle.
Right. It could be very.
Most of the time, it's very subtle.
It can be very subtle, and you won't always see that, but and generally people with a high look and a proud heart will undermine those that they see as kind of competition or those they see in authority above them, and they'll undermine that as well. And we think of the haughty look, the guy's got his nose up in the air and thinks he's better. But again, not everybody looks like that. It can be very subtle, and and it can sound good even. It can even sound like they're really spiritual people the way they say it and the way they deal with it as well.
What I was thinking is you don't have to be a person telling, you don't have to be, you can be a Christian who thinks that by following the rules and being the right person, that they're right with God, and, we get arrogant because there's no grace there, there's
Right.
no Christ there. That's all us, and we have nothing to bring.
Yeah.
And so it's completely misplaced.
We forget it's the Lord that provided it, not us ourselves. And in 1 Corinthians 13, it gives a list of the characteristics of charity. And it says that charity suffered long, is kind, charity if not, charity vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up. And these two phrases, vaunt itself and puffed up, are different in the sense that vaunting yourself is when you have it and you vaunt it. I'm better than you, and you know it. You're smarter, you're more talented, you're whatever. You vaunt that. And you've all seen people like that they know they're better and they want to make sure everybody knows that. To be puffed up is you try to make yourself look bigger than you are, like a puffer fish. You're trying, and a lot of times people that are puffed up, they really have low opinion of themselves, but they're trying to build themselves up and make themselves look better than they are. And both of those aspects, I think, tie in with this as well. Any other thoughts on the high look, Tupu?
I think I agree with Caleb mentioned culture. A lot of here in the islanders, they put people in pedestal way up there.
Right.
And they're a Samoan culture. Preacher is way, they cannot even walk in front of.
Right.
They have to walk around and bow.
Yeah.
So it's.
And when we put people in that position, they begin to act like it too. Yeah. So we're going to be careful of that. Okay, good. All right, any other comments on the high look? So what's the difference between a high look and a proud heart? Is it just being repetitious, or is there a difference between the two?
I think a high look comes from a proud heart.
Okay, a high look can come from a proud heart. I think that's true, but I think sometimes people don't realize what they're doing either. And, they can just, they're not intending to flaunt themselves, but they come across that way. And, I've seen that with intelligent people, for example, is they're constantly correcting you because they know better than you. And they don't mean it with the wrong attitude, but they can definitely come across that way. And so I think often the high look comes from a proud heart. But it can be other factors involved there as well. A lack of understanding. Caleb mentioned racism earlier, and a lot of us just don't understand what's this whole racism area. We make assumptions about people, or we just raised culturally in a certain way, or whatever else it might be, and we don't take time to get to understand that culture, and we think because they're different, we're better than they are. And it's not necessarily a proud heart, but it's a lack of understanding. Okay, Ian?
No, I was just going to say, I think it comes from the inner part. That's exactly what you just
Right.
mentioned.
Okay.
Like the publican and the sinner that was praying, and the publican says, I'm thankful that I'm
Yeah,
not like.
publicans stood there and said, look how, I'm not like this guy over here. And so I think that's true. I think you can have a proud heart without a high look. You can have a proud heart and it never expresses itself to others, but inside you're thinking, I'm better than they are. They're just stupid. We keep it in our heart, but we don't show it outwardly. And some people are very good about that. And I think you can have the proud heart without the high look. And very rare to have the high look without the proud heart. But I think it can happen in cases where we don't intend to, but because of our personality or because of our background, we come across that way. I think this is one of the problems in this area of racism is that for many, many years, people have said, well, I'm not prejudiced, but the way they treat people, there is a difference. And they don't realize they're treating them differently. And I think this covers in other areas as well. And so you can have that happen.
I think you have to give the high look a little edge on that. You know, God made me 6'3", and I'm looking down with most of the people. So it's not because I'm tall and talking down to people. It's just the way I was made.
Yeah.
But when you have a proud heart, now that's a problem.
Yeah. But I think also with the high look, you make a good point, is because you're up there, it can be intimidating, but you don't do that. You're a gentle giant.
Amen.
And and you don't intimidate because your heart is where it should be. And I think that again, I've known people who are very talented that they don't make me feel, some people are very talented, make me feel small. And there's other people who are very talented, they don't make me feel small. There's a difference there. And you get around one person that's very intelligent and they don't make you feel dumb, but this other person, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not, but they just make you feel stupid. And that happens that way. We can do that spiritually. We can make people feel like, well, I'm on a higher plane than you are. And we don't intend to do that all the time, but it happens. Okay, Jensen?
What really struck me when you said racism, like it's how you treat them. Sometimes you treat them like you're better than them. But just alluding to what it was talking about at the beginning of the verse, whoso privily slandereth his neighbor. It's not necessarily how we treat them, but what we say about them.
Right.
I'll just be honest, many times we'll talk about, personal struggles, and then someone will say, well, yeah, Filipinos really struggle a lot.
Yeah.
And then you're like, what? What does this have to do with my ethnicity or with their ethnicity that's a problem?
Yeah.
Everybody has that problem.
Yeah, we have to be careful. We get that.
And I think oftentimes we can exalt ourselves, but we also tear down and slander others.
Oh, yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's what he's
When
talking
you pick yourself up, you're pushing somebody else down in many cases. We have to be careful of that. Okay, good. All right, let's continue on, see if we can get this finished before. I know we're not going to get it finished. We're done with our time. I expected to be done with this, maybe even go to the next chapter, but that's fine. We had some good discussions. And I think there's some really excellent verses here that we really need to apply in our heart. Diane?
1 Corinthians 5:2.
Okay.
The blank, number 3.
Oh, the proud heart could be translated today as broad-minded. 1 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse number 2. 1 Corinthians 5:2. It says, and ye are puffed up and have not rather mourned that he hath done this deed might be taken away from among you. In other words, the world says be broad-minded and accept different lifestyles and accept the people that's not what the Bible's saying here. We don't have to accept that different lifestyle. Now, we don't have to be judgmental. We don't have to put the person down. We need to love them as a sinner that needs to be saved. But we can be puffed up and we can be have this high look, almost like with the broad-minded. And you see that the world looks at us Christians and says, you guys just don't understand that people are different. And you got to accept this lifestyle. We don't have to accept the lifestyle, but we don't have to be judgmental either. And so there's a balance with that.
I think the word would be today tolerant.
Tolerant is another possible word there. And that word can go both ways, though. And I think Christians are some of the least tolerant people in the world as well. We got to be careful of that and create that balance. That's a hard thing to do. And that's what the psalmist is saying. I want to make sure I don't let the wicked people influence me, but I want to influence the wicked people. I want to influence their lives, and how can I do that? And so that's what we're going to kind of finish up with here, hopefully, next week. And then we'll go into Psalms 127. And so look ahead on that, and I think you'll find some good things there as well.